Welcome and hello. Welcome to the African American Firefighter Museum. I just want to say thank you to our partners at the American Red Cross for this opportunity to reach out to you on this great May gray day. You're standing before Fire Station 30, historic Fire Station 30 on historic Central Avenue in southeast downtown LA. And before we tell you a bit about the story, let's take a look at the museum itself. So follow me in and we'll get started. By the way, I'm Michelle Banks, co-founder and president of the museum. So it's a little quieter here, so perhaps I can tell you a bit about what you saw out front. As I mentioned, you're standing in front of Fire Station 30, historic LA City Fire Station 30, which is one of the two previously segregated fire stations in Los Angeles between the mid-1920s and the mid-1950s. The grounds include the primary building, which we'll enter in a moment, as well as a back building and a wonderful memorial sculpture garden towards the back. There are a couple of pieces of information I'd like to also share with you about the facility. First, this space is listed with the National Register of Historic Places. It's a cultural heritage landmark for the city of Los Angeles. And we're a place of great story, great expression, as indicated by the wonderful mural provided by Michael Massenburg entitled Circa 1912, the big mural you saw in the front. And this beautiful piece of public art we have back here, the sculpture of Arnett Hartsfield, which was created by the internationally renowned artist Lane. So why don't we again take one step in, I'll give you a bit about the mission and purpose. Follow me. The African American Firefighter Museum is dedicated to collecting, conserving, and sharing the heritage of African American firefighters. We use the story of the old Stentorians to show how individual and collective action can advance society. Our programming includes tours, disaster preparedness on and off-site programming, and fire service recruitment and leadership training activities throughout the day. Of course, we're closed right now, but when we reopen, we invite you to come on down and take a look. Folks, history matters. Stories of courage and triumph, stories of injustice, struggle, and achievement all help to nurture our personal and collective identities. The preservation and sharing of those stories and preservation and sharing of places like Fire Station 30 helps us to continue to develop a comprehensive, diverse American history, as well as create more civically engaged and vibrant communities. We believe that the work we do here as an all-volunteer, donation-driven nonprofit, we believe the work that we do here helps to celebrate the history as well as the ongoing legacy of African American firefighters, helps connect people across community, across generations, and certainly helps to inspire a sense of community engagement and public service. And with that, I'll leave you by introducing your treat for the day. I'd like to introduce you to our African American Firefighter Museum historian, Captain Brent Burton. He is also a co-founder of the museum. And Brent's going to provide you a tour. Take care.
All right, good afternoon. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. As Michelle mentioned, my name is Brent Burton. I'm a captain with the LA County Fire Department. I'm still active, 35 years, and I'm also co-founder of the museum. Currently, I serve as the historian of the museum, which means I tell the story, I share the history. This uniform that I'm wearing today is called a period piece. This is the uniform that firefighters in Los Angeles wore from the early 1900s all the way up to the late 1940s. And so after the 1940s, they got rid of the suspenders, they wore badges, belt buckles, and so the uniforms has changed. Because we're in the museum, it's only appropriate that we wear this type of uniform. So, come with me on the tour. Now, I'm not going to give you everything because we want you to come visit. Okay, I'm going to give you a few things, but it's always amazing. Every time we have visitors that come and they see things like this, they always want to come in and see the intricate things that they cannot really get in detail from a tour like this. So we do want you to come and visit us, okay? We're going to start right over here. So, as Michelle mentioned about this building, these pictures right here talk about the restoration of the museum. The museum, when we first started working on it, was 1980 when the building closed as a fire station. For 67 years, from 1913 to 1980, this fire station operated the Central Avenue corridor. And so when they closed it in 1980, the station kind of sat dormant and looked just like this right here. Well, in 1985, we became an historic landmark, and in 1995, we started working on it, because as an historic landmark, you have to preserve your landmarks. So what the City of LA did, this was all City of LA driven and City of LA workers. They scaffolded the building, they shored up the 4 walls, and over here, you can see how they took out the ceiling and the roof, they took out the 2nd floor, and they restored it to state-of-the-art. The old apparatus doors are now restored to the same size they were when they opened in 1913. You can't fit a modern-day fire engine or fire truck through these doors the way it is because they're too narrow. Because in the old days, the fire trucks were very narrow at that time. So, the city put $1.9 million into this facility. That money was already accumulated and saved in what they called a hydrant maintenance fund that just accumulated money. So it wasn't like they took money from anywhere, it was already there. And so $1.9 million later, we opened this facility with a grand reopening in 1997, and here we are. Some of the things we're going to highlight, this is the hose cart. Now in the old days, in the firefighting in the 1800s, the hose cart was pulled by actually people. Hose was rolled up into here, and they would stop at the nearest fire plug, connect to it, and roll it out to the fire, and that's how they fought fire with the hose cart right here. Similar to that is a hose wagon from 1890. So we graduated from a hose cart to a hose wagon that was actually pulled by horses. You can see the 2 spaces on the top are for the firefighters, for the captain in charge and the driver. And the other firefighters rode on the back step, what we call the tailboard. This is a bed of hose, they had ladders on there. So that was state-of-the-art firefighting. It was pulled by horses, so the way it worked was the wagon went back in, and they had harnesses suspended from the ceiling at the time. And the horses would take their place, they hitched them up, and away they would go. Now most people think of the fire department, they think of fire poles. Well, this station has 3 of the poles. Unfortunately, you cannot slide them for safety reasons. But we have a firefighter here, a mannequin, has demonstrated sliding the pole. What's interesting about the fire pole, and a lot of people don't know, the fire pole that first came to the United States in 1878 in the Chicago Fire Department. At Engine 21, a group of black firefighters, they were segregated under the direction of Captain Dave Kenyon, who was a white man. They all got together and they had this concept of a binding pole. That binding pole turned into a fire pole they slide down. The first pole was made out of wood. Ouch. So, this pole, you can read about the story of Engine 21 in 1878, how they discovered the fire pole, how they created it, and how it moved on to other departments. If you look around this apparatus floor, the only thing that's original from this 1913 fire station is the apparatus floor and the 4 exterior walls. Everything else has been brought in and replicated. Along the wall right here, we show pictures of the first African American firefighters in various departments in Glendale, Burbank, Pasadena, so on and so forth, and all the Southern California fire departments. We have a little thing here for kids to put their head in and take pictures, and we'll get to that stuff over there in a minute. What I want to show you now is our real history. Now the question is, why is there an African American firefighter museum? Why? Well, why are there museums? When you look at museums, museums are there to capture our history, tell us about our foundation, how things started. This museum is no different because in the fire service, African Americans are the only race of folks that have been segregated in this profession since the beginning of fire departments when they had them. Our first African American firefighter is Sam Haskins. This is a picture of Sam. He was born a slave in Virginia, came to Los Angeles in the 1880s. In the 1890s, he became a firefighter, a volunteer, and unfortunately, he lost his life responding to a fire in 1895, and that's how we discovered Sam. This article right here, when you come for the visit, you can read the article in its entirety. This article was written by the LA Times historian Cecilia Rasmussen. She's the one that notified us about Sam. In fact, when we opened this museum, we didn't even know Sam existed because our first black firefighter we knew about was a gentleman named George Bright, who I'll show you earlier. But they discovered Sam, and now that we have our history intact, we have it right here to show our display. Over here is a turnout locker, and the most fitting person's turnout to have in this locker is Doug Berry, the first African American fire chief of the LA Fire Department. Here's Chief Berry's turnout coat. As you can see, it's a pretty big coat because Chief Berry's a tall guy. And so this is his fire chief helmet, his battalion chief helmet, and so he's donated this to the museum. I want to show you over here. The thing about our museum is that we capture a lot of pictures. There's a gentleman we'll speak about later on named Arnett Hartsfield. Arnett Hartsfield was our original historian, and a lot of these pictures came from his collection from 1921 to 1918. And here's George Wright, who we talked about. For years and years and years, we always thought that George Wright was our first black firefighter because he started in 1897, and we had no pictures or information about anybody before him. When he promoted to lieutenant in 1902, that started segregation because it was unthinkable in those days to have a black man in charge of others besides other black firefighters. So in 1902, he became a captain, became a lieutenant, and then he was in charge of a crew of firefighters in Hose Company number 4. And then this is Ed Bowen, who also worked with them. We're going to bypass some of these folks. I want to get to this picture right here. And this picture was taken in 1918. Now, we talked about the hose wagon, the hose cart. The fire department started phasing out horses around 1912. And it wasn't until 1918 they phased all of them out. Well, ironically, in 1918 is when the black firefighters got their motorized fire engine. And so here they are, Captain Hall in charge of a group of firefighters at Hose Company 4 in charge of these guys. Now, why do I say Hose Company 4? When the fire department first segregated in 1902 because of Bright's promotion, they put all the firefighters down at Hose Company 4, which is near Beverly Boulevard near Alvarado Street, across from Belmont High School before it was built. So they worked there. Well, Belmont High School was built in 1924. So in 1924, when they opened Belmont High School, it was unthinkable from the school board's position, the city council, and the fire commission to have black firefighters in charge in positions of authority in front of white school children. In 1924, they felt that was sending the wrong message. So it was thought of to move all the black firefighters to this fire station here. Why here? Well, outside is the Central Avenue corridor. During the Great Migration of the 1920s and 30s, a lot of blacks that left the Deep South were migrating to Los Angeles, and this was the part of town where they all migrated to. This was called the East Side. Everything east of Main to Alameda and from 1st Street all the way south to Slauson, this whole community was the black community, predominantly black. 2 fire stations, 1 police station were all in this area. Station 30 was where the black community was starting to gravitate to, so it was only wise to move the black firefighters here. In 1936, the next station down the street at 34th and Central, station number 14, was opened up. And then around the corner on Newton Street, right next to the Red Cross, was the old Newton Street Police Station. In the early morning watch from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. was the early morning watch that was all black. Very interesting how it all worked out. So, this is why the black firefighters came here. I like this picture right here. This has been taken in 1928 of all the black firefighters in their firefighting positions. You can see the fire trucks. These are the 2 engines, the ladder truck, the tillerman right there. And it's interesting, this gentleman's name is Claude Shipp, the first tillerman. His grandson, Larry, became a Los Angeles firefighter. Very interesting picture. You can see how the steeple was on the top here. They had an old hose tower in the back. So if you look at the fire station back then to today, you can see how we've tried to restore it as much as we could to the way it looked. And that's what we've done. Now, right over here, we have extinguishers. Now, the thing about extinguishers, these are the old extinguishers. These are all we call soda ash extinguishers. The way they used to work is you had to turn them upside down and you aimed it. It was a soda acid extinguisher. We don't use these extinguishers anymore, so we advise you that if you do have a fire extinguisher, make sure it's a current one and you get it checked at least once a year. And I'm talking about fire extinguishers in terms of fire safety. If you have a smoke detector, the rule is this. When you change your clock, change your battery. So twice a year you want to change your battery. If you heard that chirping noise in your house, that's not a bird, that's your smoke detector. That means the battery's going low and it's time to change it. Right here, we all know what this is. You see them on the corners, they're painted yellow, these are fire hydrants. Well, if you get a chance to come to the museum, you can see the actual inner workings of a fire hydrant. In Los Angeles, we have a great water system. These extinguishers, the water system is stored under pressure, so if you ever see it knocked off and water goes into the sky, That's because our extinguishers or our water hydrants, our fire hydrants are under pressure. So we shut them down. That's the job the fire department does. Okay, let's go upstairs and take a look at the museum gallery. Now the thing about the museum gallery, we were able to take our old dormitory and make that the gallery. And we took the old recreation room, we made that a room we call the gold room. I'll show you that. There's so many interesting things to see here. We have our gift shop is here, so we're going to buy some gifts. Our donation board is right here. There's our back door that leads out to the back kitchen. I'm sure Michelle talked about the back building outside. In the old days, fire stations that were built before 1930, the kitchen was built separately in the back because they had horses. It was against health regulations to have horses quartered in the same building where kitchen was for the smells and flies and things like that. So the kitchens were always a separate building out back. 1930 came around, horses were totally phased out, so they started to build the kitchens inside the fire stations. So that's why the kitchen in this station is out back. So let's go upstairs. Now in the old days, when a fire call would come in, every fire station would get the alarm. So that meant somebody had to get up, slide the pole, check to see if it was for them, and then come back upstairs. The old stairs, these have been resurfaced and refinished, but the old stairs used to have indentations of guys climbing the stairs almost every other night or every night for a lot of times to see if the call was for them until they changed the alarm system. So come on in. This was the old dormitory, and we made the dormitory into our gallery. You see we have a nice display of replica badges. We have small fire engines, fire helmets, things like that. This is one of my favorite pictures. This picture is of every black firefighter in Los Angeles in 1925, the year after they moved here. The four gentlemen seated here are the officers, Captain William Hall and his lieutenants. These are all the firefighters that worked here. You can see how it looked back then. In this same picture we saw downstairs in 1928. Now in this dormitory, where the firefighters slept, we have two poles. A pole here and a pole in the center. Because there used to be about 13 beds around this whole dormitory, plus the cabins where they slept. In the old days, and when I even started in the 1980s, the rule was when you went to bed, you brought your turnout boots and your turnout pants, they're right next to your bed. Because when you got an alarm, you got up, put your boots on, pulled your pants up, hit the pole, and you got in the fire truck, you went away. Well, today's fire service, we don't even do this. We don't even bring our boots into the sleeping areas anymore because of the contaminants in here. So today, we always leave our firefighting boots at the rig, and we have exercise clothes that we sleep in, and we get to the fire truck that way. That's how it works. Around here, we have different uniforms, different storyboards. I'll show you some of these. Now, Delisa Davies was our first African-American woman firefighter to pass probation on LA City Fire. And before she retired, after 30 plus years of service, she donated her dress uniform to the museum. This is her uniform. That's why Davies is on this name tag. This is the work uniform the firefighters wore in the 1970s. So after this uniform, they went to a different style uniform of a long sleeve shirt with no tie, and then they went to this as a work uniform. This uniform is worn by fire inspectors, and this uniform is what we call the dungarees. In fact, this was my uniform when I was 18 years old. Can't fit into it now. Now, we have a storyboard right here of the LA City Fire Department history. And again, when you come and visit us, every picture has a story. What I want to highlight is this gentleman right here and this picture right here. There's two pictures I'll highlight right now. This gentleman right here in this nice suit is William Glenn. William Glenn came on the LA Fire Department in 1900. He was our third black firefighter. And in 1902, when George Bright promoted to lieutenant, William Glenn felt that he sewed up the next position up, so he left and laddered over to the police department. So he holds the moniker of being the third black firefighter and the third black policeman in the city of Los Angeles. When he retired in 1924, he was the acting captain of the Detective Bureau at Newton Street Police Station. This picture here, if you can notice, these guys have Cokes in their hand. They're drinking Coca-Colas. Why? Because we are right across the street from the Coca-Cola factory. the Coca-Cola factory and this fire station have had a long, long-lasting positive relationship. Coke, every day, the rookie had to go across the street and get a case of Cokes. They were in a wooden crate and they were glass bottles. He had to navigate the traffic, the streetcars, and he made sure he did not drop any Cokes on his way back over. Everyone got two, the rookie got one. That's how it goes. Over here, we're going to look at the storyline of some of the history of Los Angeles County Fire Department. The one picture I highlight on this board right here is this gentleman right here. Now, if you've ever watched the TV show Emergency, you'll see the dispatcher, the voice of LA we call him. His name was Sam Lanier. So Sam Lanier did over 25 years in the fire service. This is him at his retirement. But he was always the guy you saw dispatching the calls on the show Emergency. He was a real live firefighter dispatcher. Now, if you're from Los Angeles and you are older than 55 years old, you probably remember these. These are what we call the old pull boxes. If you live in New York or San Francisco, you still see them. We got rid of them in Los Angeles in the early 1970s because they were too much of a hassle. More people started to have phones. It was easy to call the fire department from your telephone, but in the old days, you had a fire alarm pull box at different locations throughout the city. Well, as time went on, at 3 o'clock, fire stations were responding to these boxes all the time. Why? School let out. And a lot of kids mischievously wanted to pull the firebox and keep walking, and then there were a lot of false alarms. So these things were in service from the beginning of the 1900s all the way into the early 1970s. Let's walk in here. This room we're in right now was known as the rec room of the fire station. There used to be a pool table here, chairs all around, and before television, there was radio. So the firefighters in the 40s would listen to the Joe Louis fights. And they would listen to them and they would just, hey, get him, slug him. Well, now you got your phone, you can see anything right here in the palm of your hand. Then they got television. So this was the old rec room. We've now made this into what's called the gold room. What is the gold room? Chiefs wear gold. And so these are all the chiefs in the fire department that we highlight, African American chiefs. The fire chiefs, which are the head of the departments, are highlighted on the table. Also, we have highlighted our African American women firefighters. We have a lot of pioneering African American women in the fire service. And our first African American woman fire chief in the country was Rosemary Cloud at East Point, Georgia. This is Rosemary right here. And then we had Debbie Pryor from Berkeley, California Fire Department. And we had Teresa Reed of the Oakland Fire Department. These three women have now retired from the fire service, but they were pioneers and they were legends during their time in the fire service. Ronnie Stillsmall was the first woman to make battalion chief, African American fire chief, battalion chief in the LA County Fire Department. It's her picture right here. And the current, still in operating, fire chief in Decatur, Georgia, Tony Washington. Tony is still the fire chief in Decatur, Georgia, and she's still active, so we have her to highlight. Now, here's something very interesting. When you think of firefighters, you don't think of dolls too often. Well, we have what's called a black firefighter Barbie doll. It was created in 1980 by a black woman engineer from Mattel. And so it's on display here. One of our members, his daughter had it, and so we thought it'd be fitting to donate this same Barbie doll to the museum, so we have it here on display, as well as other pioneering women firefighters. And you can see some of the other chiefs, and most of these gentlemen have interesting stories about how they obtained their promotion, where they worked, what they did, things they innovated. And when you come visit us, we can tell you more about that. We're going to go back into this room here. Now, the fire department in Los Angeles integrated in the year 1955. The conversation started in 1954. Why? Because the landmark decision of Brown versus Board of Education at the U.S. Supreme Court level said integration or segregation is no longer the law of the land. So the black firefighters felt it was their opportunity to try to figure out how we can get out of this two-station department where we're limited to promotional positions and start moving into other stations and possibly going higher. So when they did integrate in 1955, They won that battle, but it was a war. Unfortunately, a lot of them went to these different stations and they were met with a lot of resistance because the fire chief at that time, John Alderson, didn't want to integrate, and the mayor made him do that. So as he did that, only 2% of the firefighters were either for integration or didn't mind. The rest of the fire department said, we don't want it because the fire chief doesn't want it. So they made life hard. Here's the story of firefighter Ronaldo Lopez. Spanish surname, but he was an African-American firefighter. He got integrated into Fire Station 46, which is in South LA at Vernon and Normandy. June of 1955, racial ruckus in the fire department. When he was standing floor watch at his fire station, the white firefighters put this sign on the kitchen door that said white adults to keep him out, as a reminder to keep him out. And so he took a picture of this sign, and it ended up on the Channel 2 News, and they exposed what was going on in the fire department. And so that's why I made front page news headlines. Well, he never got any credit for that picture. He just got a lot of harassment. We honored him 45 years later in June of 2000 for taking this picture. So here's Ray Lopez as an older gentleman, and we have him right here. And the Times did a real good story about us honoring him for taking that picture. It took a lot of courage back then. And the price he paid was a lot of harassment and a lot of challenge. As a result of that picture, he also wrote this letter. This was a 4-page letter condensed into one big page, and it listed 12 different items of unjust and unfair treatment that he was going through at the time. The number 12th item in bold was that picture right there. So, how did this all turn out? From 1955 until 1963, black firefighters working in these fire stations were ostracized. They were treated much differently. They had to bring their own pots and pans to cook with, own utensils to eat with, own plates to eat from, and cups to drink from, because white firefighters did not want to share with them. Very rough life. So in 1963, here's a picture of a meeting that occurred between Mayor Sam Yorty down the forefront, Arnett Hartsfield's in the picture, and Tom Bradley's in the back. How did that come about? Arnett Hartsfield, who was just retired as a firefighter, was a college classmate with Tom Bradley. Tom Bradley was a city councilman. So Arnett asked Tom Bradley to get an audience with Mayor Yorty, and so the black firefighters can express to him what they're going through. Marvin LeBlanc is a white gentleman in the middle up there, and I don't have the name of this gentleman down the bottom right. But these two gentlemen were also firefighters that were very sympathetic to the cause of black firefighters. They were able to give the perspective from a white person of what they were hearing and seeing in the fire stations. Once that meeting occurred, once that meeting was finished, Sam Yorty issued a formal order to the fire department that you will all eat together and act like a grown-up fire department, is what he said. And so that kind of made all that go away of the harsh treatment. Over here, we have a picture of Ernie Roberts. Now, Ernie Roberts, to us, paid the ultimate sacrifice during the integration of the fire department. He didn't die, although he has passed away. But at the time, in 1955, he was amongst the first group of firefighters to get integrated into a fire station downtown LA. Well, one night, it was just Ernie and another gentleman, Charles Saunders. They were on duty. The white firefighters decided to play a very, very cruel prank on them. They took their pillowcases from their pillows while they were not in the dorm and used them as toilet paper and put it back onto their beds and turned the lights off. When Charles and Ernie came to go to bed, all of a sudden, there was a big problem. Charles knew that something smelled differently, so he went downstairs to sleep. Ernie didn't even notice the smell. He laid his head in somebody's human filth. When he went to go complain to the captain didn't want to believe him. Ernie had a nervous breakdown at the fire station. They took him home in the ambulance. His hair turned white in a matter of 60 days. And when he came back, he transferred to another station, and he worked all the way up until 1982, and that's when this picture was taken. And you can see the smile on his face. Didn't make him bitter, just made him more proud to serve. His son became a firefighter in 1977. His son Winston was the first black scuba diver in the LA Fire Department's history. So there was a triumph from this. It's just unfortunate. These are some other pictures that we've got a chance to look at, and there's a lot of great stories of some of these men here that we'll share when you come and visit us, We'll tell you more. We don't want to give everything away right now. Tom Collier was one of our pioneering black firefighters. He worked here at Station 30. He went to Station 3 in downtown LA. And he was on this apparatus called the snorkel. Unfortunately, the snorkel tipped over, and he was in that basket. 2 other firefighters were severely injured. Tom was fatally injured. Tom lost his life on that day in July of 1970. This is a large picture of the first recruit class where our first black firefighter after segregation passed. This is Paul Arduna. Paul Arduna was the 3rd black firefighter hired after they integrated, but the first to actually pass his probation, his drill tower class, and his probation. He's the only black firefighter in his class. And they tried to fire him because that was pretty much the notion. They didn't want integration to work, so we're going to try to make it bad for those that we can, and that's what happened right there. Have you ever heard of a group called the Tuskegee Airmen? These were the black pilots that flew missions over in Europe during World War II. 5 of those men became LA firefighters. Here are 2 of them right here, Grady Bryant and Fitz Banks. Grady Bryant maintained his position in the Air Force Reserve. When he retired, he was promoted to the position of Lieutenant Colonel. And many thought that he'd be the first black battalion chief in the LA Fire Department, although James Shern did that. So Grady Bryant, Fitz Banks, Roger Duncan, Emmett Wilhite, and Reggie Ballard were the 5 black men that were Tuskegee Airmen and joined the LA Fire Department. So we want to make sure we highlight them right here. Now we saw the black firefighter doll in the other room. Well, boys, as you know, play with action figures. So this toy company, America's Finest, decided to make this action figure in honor of the firefighters at Fire Station 94, which is in the Baldwin Hills, Crenshaw District. Because that station has always had a high visibility number of African American firefighters there, they coined Station 94. And at Station 94, one of the pioneering firefighters who worked there is Wally DeCure. Wally DeCure, this is him in action at Station 94, and here's Wally right here after he retired and a few years before he passed away. So from his legacy and others like Al Reinhardt and Harold Capers and Ed Garrison and gentlemen like them that worked at 94s, they decided to create this action figure doll to replicate that. Now we talked about Mr. Hartsfield, Arnett, the rookie Hartsfield. The rookie was his nickname because, interestingly, he became a firefighter in 1940. The fire department had changed the way it trained. For years and years prior to him coming on the job, the fire department would just have the recruits come to the academy, train them, they go home. Well, the year he started, they decided to have the recruits stay overnight in the academy to get used to the fire station life. The only problem was he was the only black rookie in his class, and he couldn't stay overnight because he'd have to show they were integrated. So what they did was they had him take his training in the daytime, and they were going to have him sleep here with the other firefighters. When the chiefs called the station here to tell them what's going to happen, the captains here said, you know what, don't humiliate this man, just send him to us, we'll train him ourselves. The captain said, fine. So he showed up to the academy on his first day, and they said, you must be Hartsfield. He was so proud, but of course they knew he was coming. He was the only black guy in the class. They said, you go to Central Avenue, Station 30. He said, well, we're on Central. They looked at him like, you don't even know? Arnett didn't even know the fire department was segregated. He comes to Station 30, he walks in here, sees all the black firefighters, and said, what's going on? The captain explained to him what happened. He said he felt so ashamed, he was so proud at the same time. So, after his hiring, he was trained here, they decided to let the recruits after him stay overnight, but when they graduated, they all came here, or they came to Station 14. He was very instrumental. Some of the things that he did were just really, after World War II, he was an officer in World War II. He got recalled to the war because he was a UCLA ROTC student. He used the GI Bill to get his law degree from USC, and he used that law knowledge to help lead the immigration fight from the firefighter standpoint in the LA Fire Department. So here, this is his accolades from the war, for being in the United States Army as a lieutenant. This was presented to him from the Los Angeles Fire Department Historical Society, and he received the first ever Lifetime Achievement Award from the LA Fire Department. And Fire Chief Millage Peaks, our second black fire chief, made him honorary fire chief and gave him this helmet and this breast jacket. You can see replicas of badges and helmets when you come on the tour and see other things with us. I'm going to show you something over here. Now, we talked about Ray Lopez and how when he integrated the fire department, all the trouble that he had. When we presented him with that letter that he wrote, he presented us with all the newspaper articles of 1955 of the integration of the fire department. He had captured them. So one of our members took them and put them in chronological order, and another firefighter came up here from San Diego, firefighter Pam Thomas, and she was really into scrapbooking and did such a beautiful job. And she has perfectly preserved and scrapbooked all of the articles dealing with the segregation of the fire department. Here's that sign again in its entirety. There's Ray Lopez. So all the articles dealing around the integration of the fire department are all captured right here. And we also have these digitally too. And we want our visitors to come and see this and read about it. There's so much information and research here. How can people think of something like this in Los Angeles? When you think of segregation, you think of the Deep South and Jim Crow. Well, it was here in LA. That's how it was. So when they integrated in 1955, the firefighters had a real big struggle, but now in the fire services, we're trying to make it a place of equality. We'll show you some other things in here and we'll wrap up our tour. More uniforms, badges. Now here's a room in here we're gonna keep the door closed until you get a chance to come see. We call this the International Room. And we have firefighter artifacts and pictures and stories that's highlighted from firefighters around the country that are kept in there. Around this room here we highlight our women firefighters and the accomplishments that they've made in the fire department. We also have a video room. We have a video that we show about our museum that's on the loop. And we show that, we also show other films. And during 9/11, we have a film called All Our Sons. It's the story of the 12 African-American firefighters that lost their lives during the 9/11 World Trade Center disaster. So we have them here. So this is our museum. We're here every Tuesday and Thursday from 10 to 2 and from every Sunday from 1 to 4. You can visit our website. It's going to be placed on the chat there. And so we thank you for coming. If there's any questions, we'll take the questions.